Formula One on 5 Live.
Good afternoon from Montreal. Welcome to the circuit Gilles Villeneuve here in Canada. The track named after the legendary Canadian Ferrari driver Gilles Villeneuve, who won here back in 1978. It's a driver's favourite, it's a fan's favourite, and generally everybody loves a bit of Canada. Located in the Parc Jeux de Pau on the man-made island, the Notre Dame Island in the St. Lawrence River. Wildlife, particularly of the groundhog variety, always a sight here too. The grandstand starting to fill up nicely, but it's very overcast. It's not too cold, but rain is in the air and scheduled to fall sporadically throughout the weekend. And ahead of us here, the first free practice session to kick-start proceedings for the Canadian Grand Prix weekend. Up in the commentary box, guiding you through all the action, is myself, Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson. And for the first time this season, and I think a first F1 commentary from American racing driver Oliver Askew. Welcome, Oliver, to the commentary box. Who are you?
Well, my name's Oliver Askew. I'm from Jupiter, Florida. We were just joking earlier. Neighbors with Michael Jordan, Serena Williams.
They're neighbours with you is really how it should be.
Yeah, I put Jupiter on the map.
Well, I would say so. But for those who don't know, you've obviously risen up the ranks through the American system, Indy Lights, and before that, raced a bit in IndyCar as well. Also Formula E with a big name that might well be in Formula One in a few years, the Andretti team. Talk us through sort of what your career highlights been so far.
Yeah, so started racing cars in 2017 in USF 2000 and the Road to Indy ladder system. Being able to win scholarships to move forward and propel myself into professional racing and IndyCar, which was the final goal. That was a fantastic opportunity for me, and raced in IndyCar with McLaren in 2020 as a rookie. Did a couple of races in 21 as well. Formula E in 22, as you said, with Andretti Autosport, a team that I won the Indy Lights Championship in 2019 with. So, great relationship with them. And we'll be doing more with them in the future.
Well, it's really nice to have you join us into the commentary box.
It's great to be
here
here.
Weekend. Let's keep you up to speed with how it all stands coming into this weekend, of course. The 8th race of the Formula One season in 2023. And it is Max Verstappen who continues his dominance. Now he has 170 points at the top of the driver's standings, 53 points clear of his teammate Sergio Perez, who is 18 points clear of Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, rounding out the top 5 in the driver's standings. Over in the teams, it is of course Red Bull. Could they possibly win every single race of the season and become the first team in Formula One to ever do that? At the moment, it's looking very, very good, and they are 135 points clear at the top. Mercedes, though, after a double podium last time out in Spain, have usurped Aston Martin and gone up into second. So it's Red Bull, Mercedes, Aston Martin, then it's Ferrari and Alpine at the top 5 in the constructors standings at the moment. We'd love to hear from you as well throughout the course of this session and the weekend. On Twitter, get involved, hashtag BBCF1. Any questions, queries, we'd love to hear them. And the email address as well is f1@bbc.co.uk. As the Red Bulls, both of them, Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, line astern at the end of the pit lane, are waiting for the green light to come on and for this first session to get underway. What have you actually made, Ollie, of the Formula One season so far? It's so easy to say, well, Max Verstappen is kind of running away with this, but there are some good battles behind him that we can pick out.
Well, there is excitement. You just got to look for it. That's in the midfield battle, extremely tight as always. And we see both Red Bulls making a statement there at the end of pit lane, the first to make it on track as we were about to go green. It's just such a development race as always. These, looking at our images here of Lewis Hamilton getting in the car. This is a team that has brought updates to Monaco, right? But we haven't seen them, in anger on a proper road/street circuit. This is a bit of a hybrid here in Montreal. I think it's going to be how much we have 34.8% of the season completed. Still a lot to go. You see, this is I have the notes in front of me from you. Huh?
He's done some research. Brilliant. Well, when you say it like that, in what was, originally scheduled to be one of the longest Formula One season in history, of course, we lost a couple of Grand Prix before. Well, we lost China before we even really got going, and of course the cancellation of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix as well. But pleased to hear we have got a green light at the end of the pit lane, and the session is now underway at 59 minutes and 43 seconds on the clock for those who wish to sync up, and Max Verstappen is first out onto the track. Andrew, let's bring you in, shall we? The BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson. It was quite interesting, some of the comments that Max Verstappen had to say coming into this weekend yesterday, wasn't it? If somebody doesn't want to win, well, he's got one person in mind. If he doesn't want to win, he's got one person in mind who he would quite like to see take a Grand Prix victory.
Yeah, Fernando Alonso. There's a bit of bromance going on between the two of them this year and last year, in fact. In fact, it was a year ago, 1 day short of a year ago, that Fernando Alonso joined Max Verstappen on the front row here in the wet. And it's expected to be a wet weekend this year as well, Harry. Actually, I'm surprised that it's dry and sunny at the moment. So sunny that I'm wondering whether we should move the blinds down in the commentary box. I can't really see the screens, but the teams thought it was going to rain in this session, and they're certain it's going to rain in the next session later on today. And in qualifying tomorrow, it's even more certain that it's going to rain. Apparently, there's I think I saw the BBC weather forecaster in Ferguson, so we better bring our coats and wear waterproof shoes. And I think that's probably why the Red Bulls are so keen to get out in this session early on, what will be a dusty, dirty track lacking in grip. Sometimes the top drivers like to leave that to the sort of minnows to clean it up for them.
Well, we'll get a little weather update, shall we, and see what conditions are like, because this weekend Rosanna Tennant is down on the ground for us. Hi, Rosanna.
Hello, thank you very much. Yes, it was raining here yesterday in Montreal, wasn't it, as we all piled into the commentary box to record the Checkered Flag podcast. But now it's very bright and actually quite warm. So all of the predictions for rain aren't coming true right now, but I do think there's still a chance, and I think the teams do think it's going to rain over the weekend. But nice and bright, nice and warm. I've even taken my jacket off for this particular session. If I need it again, we'll find out.
I lost the drive shaft. You know what to do, no gears.
Well, and that was the voice of Pierre Gasly, who sounds like is not having a good start to his FP1 drive shaft issues. No gears, Ollie. That's a bit of a disaster for a driver to kickstart practice with.
No, certainly not what that team or Pierre Gasly wants. And on the first lap of FP1, hopefully they're able to figure out what's going on there. Maybe an electrical issue, in best case scenario. So we'll keep you updated on that. Oh, he's stopped on track here. Where is this?
Yeah, we've got a yellow flag in Sector 2, and we're just listening to the sound of Pierre Gasly. He is stationary in that Alpine in the middle sector. Now, I think that is on the approach to turn 8, I believe. So the first sort of straight before we then get to the approach of the hairpin further round. 4.3 kilometres this track, 2.7 miles just over, 14 turns, 6 that go left, 8 that go right, and concerned looks on the faces of the Alpine team who watch on from their garages. The Alpine pulled across right off the racing line as the McLaren trundles by, followed by the Red Bull, and then the green flag awaits them as soon as they get going. But Gasly is still stuck there and not going anywhere quickly, and this is already bringing a little bit of a flashback to Baku. Not so many flames though this time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Harry, it's a bit of the story of Alpine's season so far. The car, not at the beginning of the year, but certainly in the last few races, the car's beginning to look really quick. They've been qualifying up at the front, close to the front anyway. No one's close to Red Bull, obviously. Here's Gasly's radio.
Okay, can you try to engage gear again? Can we try to pull the right-hand clutch and release it again?
So that has actually brought out a red flag as we hear Pierre Gasly being given some instructions on how to get that Alpine back moving again. He's still stationary, but the red flag is out. Because it's practice, the clock still continues to count down despite a red flag, which basically stops the session. If we're in qualifying or the race, we would stop the time as well. This is the sound of Gasly then, coming through turn 7.
Yeah, it was on the downshift into turn 7. He lost the gearbox there, it sounds like. So yeah, Gasly's a driver in a team of Alpine in the meat of that midfield battle, where a couple tenths makes a massive difference. So yeah, not how they want to start their weekend. They're going to be playing catch up from now on. Although this is where the track progression is the most steep through FP1. It's dusty. You can see the dust flying off the back of the diffuser, the rear diffuser of these cars going down the straightaway.
Yeah, if you're going to miss a session, Ollie, this will be the one to miss, wouldn't it, in Canada? But just to finish the point I was trying to make, the car's been looking quick, but they've kind of not been able to get out of their own way a lot of the time, Alpine. Okay, Esteban Ocon, Gasly's teammate, was on the podium in Monaco, and they've had a couple of strong races recently. But not so long ago, Miami, just over a month ago, where the CEO of the team and the entire Alpine car company basically tore a strip off them in public twice. Here's Gasly again.
Can you ask the marshals to stop and try to restart the engine again?
Or not Gasly, as the case may be. His engineer trying to instruct him as he gets pushed to a safe place on the track so they can move that car out of the way and get the session going. Accusing them of dilettantism and just basically not being good enough. So this is exactly not what Laurent Rossi wants to see.
It sounds like they were instructing him to try and restart he's going now. So the marshals are moving away from the car. That the engine must be fired again.
So the Alpine is currently still stationary on the right-hand side into the approach of turn 8. There's a little bit of a bridge that you roll under, and then you immediately get to the quick right-hand, left-hand chicane, which then brings you onto the straight that approaches the hairpin. And then you're into the final section of the lap. But the Alpine is still stopped. The marshals were rolling that car forward, but perhaps Gasly has now half instructed them to stop and let him try and restart it. Silence at the moment down on Gasly's car. Esteban Ocon, his teammate, is back into the garage with all of the other teams. We are under red flag conditions here in practice 1, and a bit of work going on around that Alpine, but Esteban Ocon looking sharp and focused. But as Andrew said on it, if you're going to miss any kind of session or have issues, this is the one. I dragged you round for a track walk yesterday in the slightly... well, they started pleasant in terms of conditions, and then it got hotter and hotter as we walked round. But the track was covered in muck and dust and leaves, because we're essentially in the middle of a park. So loads of overhanging trees and shadows as well, which collect things, not to mention the wildlife that scurry across. So really, it does take quite a lot to clean up this track.
Yeah, the marshals do a good job of cleaning the dirt and the standing. Oh, here's a radio transmission, maybe? No?
Didn't want to talk. Gasly is now, though. The marshals are back at all four wheels and starting to roll that Alpine away again. So I fear the writing may well be on the wall for Gasly.
I was going to say, at most races on the F1 calendar, they have support series, and they're always out before the... Oh, here's Gasly radio now.
Okay, Nate, sorry. Can you switch the car to P0, please? So P1, then P0. Sorry, we can't get this back.
Okay, so it looks like session over.
Session over for Gasly. He's been whipped there behind the barriers, and unfortunately for Pierre Gasly, that looks like his day is done, as we hopefully will be able to get back to green flag running fairly quickly, because the marshals have done a good job of sweeping that Alpine out the way.
Yeah, so on this particular weekend, the F1600 cars, or Formula Ford cars, if you would, as well as the Ferrari Challenge cars, they do clean up the track well before these F1 cars get going. So yeah, that debris and the standing dirt will be swept off the track, but the rubber that these Pirelli tires put down in Formula One is what's going to make the track progression so steep here through free practice 1.
Well, the Mercedes duo are keen to get back out onto the track, and it is George Russell and Lewis Hamilton lying astern. It was the Red Bulls at the start of this session to get going for green, and now the Mercedes have got the jump on everybody as we await for the green flag to get back underway, and hopefully haven't seen any messages from race control at the moment to say what time we will get back under green flag conditions, but they wanted to get the best track position of anybody. We've got a home hero on the track as well, of course. Lance Stroll running a a special helmet, which is actually going to auction off along with livery and boots. Of course, coming into this weekend, big news around the wildfires that are affecting Canada, and particularly Quebec too, in the province. And so he doing his part in raising much needed funds and, of course, to raise awareness. And all of our thoughts go with the people affected and helping to fight those wildfires. Thankfully, we are able to still continue the weekend here in Montreal as normal. Now, the big question, or one of the key talking points coming into this weekend, Mercedes brought some new upgrades in Monaco, then saw the full effect perhaps in Spain. A double podium. Lewis Hamilton is saying we finally found our North Star. We know where we're going. We know what we're doing. Is this suddenly the turnaround, Andrew, for Mercedes? They're now in P2 in the constructors. They've got two drivers, perhaps unlike Aston Martin, who can consistently score big points. Are they now the second best team?
Well, although Hamilton yesterday said that the whole factory was buzzing after Spain, and that they, as you said, it was a nice quote, wasn't it, about the North Star. Actually, when he brought up the topic of this weekend, he wasn't quite so enthusiastic. And George Russell basically spelt it out. They don't expect to be that quick in Canada. He said that he thought the Aston Martins would be quicker than them. And that's before they even, that's obviously with data that Mercedes have, before knowing about the Aston Martin update, which is on the car. The noise, by the way, you can hear in the background is some people working on the back of Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin. Not quite sure whether there's anything serious wrong with that or not yet. But the thing was that if you remember last year, when they were struggling so much with the porpoising and bouncing issues and lack of competitiveness overall, they did bring a big upgrade to Spain that year too. And the car went pretty well. Lewis Hamilton was one of the strongest drivers during that race. In a recovery drive, here's Joe's radio.
Check the grounding and the floor, man. I'm like, really stiff. I'm feeling every bump on the track.
Guan Yu Zhou, or Zhou Guan Yu, sorry, is not enjoying the ride of his Alfa Romeo at the moment. Back to Mercedes, sorry. But they left Spain, and Russell was on the podium there. George Russell, Lewis Hamilton's teammate. They left Spain and came to Canada, and it was all back to square one, unfortunately. So I don't think they're out of the woods yet, Mercedes, and I think it's going to take a few more races before they have a really clear picture of where they are. But they did one thing they did say, both of them, Hamilton and Russell, yesterday, is that there are more upgrades coming. And it sounds like Silverstone is going to be the time for that. So I don't think they would have mentioned it in the way they did yesterday if that upgrade for Silverstone wasn't reasonably substantial as well.
Well, speaking of Mercedes, both of the cars, perhaps a little preemptive of the green light at the end of the pit lane, they're being wheeled back, Rosanna.
They are indeed, yes. Lewis Hamilton being wheeled pretty quickly, I have to say. Props to the mechanics, jogging along. I was actually in the gym with the Mercedes mechanics yesterday. So they've obviously been putting in the training, and we're just seeing a shot of Ron Meadows, the sporting director. Of course, he's in charge of all those mechanics. So doing a good job, but maybe just a little overzealous to get going again.
Yes, quite possibly there that they get wheeled. Hamilton first is wheeled back in, and Russell shortly following as well. We did get a few lap times though in the short running that we did have. That were 12 drivers set a lap time. Valtteri Bottas being the fastest of them in his Alfa Romeo, a 1:18.7. Coincidentally, he holds the lap record around this track back in 2019, and his Mercedes a 1:13.078. So quite clearly some way off that, but I imagine we will potentially most likely beat that lap time this weekend. We'll see how that goes. Still though, under red flag conditions here for free practice one for the Canadian Grand Prix. Track needs to be really cleared up though, lots of muck on it, and Pierre Gasly in his Alpine having what sounds like drive shaft or gearing issues in that Alpine, trying to get it restarted. It didn't work, and the marshals had to wheel him off behind the barriers.
Andrew, we often hear teams downplay their expectations on upcoming weekends. Is that, how do they figure? Is it based off simulation or?
Yeah, so they run the upgrades in the simulator, both in the actual simulator that the drivers drive, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, those sorts of things, and also in the sort of computer systems that they have. And they predict how the car is going to behave and what sort of lap time game they expect. Everyone always gets really excited about upgrades, but they're very rarely more than a tenth or two in terms of performance, even a big step forward from Mercedes, of the type that Mercedes had. Although quite often, one of the things they have said, Mercedes, about this particular redesign is that they thought that perhaps the confidence it gives the drivers might in the end be worth more than the sort of raw predicted data improvement, because maybe you can explain why, Ollie, but it's one thing for the maths to say and the physics to say, well, this is going to make you 0.2 quicker in terms of amount of downforce or whatever other measurements they could use, and there are many. But if the driver feels confident, then he can push harder and be more confident about taking the car to the limit more often. And one of the problems that Mercedes have had this year is the unpredictability of the rear end and the drivers not knowing whether it was going to hang on for them when they turned in. Maybe you could talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, it sounds like they were stuck in a way, the drivers. And at the end of the day, the drivers are the heart of the race car. And, having that confidence like Max Verstappen has, for example, in that Red Bull, showing up on the weekend and just doing what he knows and not having to worry about, those the unknowns in the car. So certainly something that drivers down the grid are striving for, and with confidence you can then progress into the weekend much quicker and get the optimum out of the car towards the end of qualifying.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that Ferrari particularly have been struggling with this year. Charles Leclerc yesterday, both Ferrari drivers have been saying the same thing. The car is inconsistent. They don't know how it's going to behave basically from one corner to another, sometimes from within one corner. It might be understeering 1 minute and oversteering the next, and there's obviously some kind of aerodynamic inconsistency going on with that car. And Charles Leclerc was saying yesterday that people might remember he qualified 19th in Spain, not understanding why the car felt as weird as it did. And they've gone back through the data in the factory and they've discovered he was losing 6 to 7 tenths in the left-hand corners at Barcelona, and there's only about 2 left-hand corners at Barcelona, 2 or 3.
But they still don't know.
And they still don't know what's wrong with it. And he said what was wrong with it? And he said that's worrying, was his word.
Because seemingly, although this is a very different track to what we experienced in Barcelona, that could happen again and again. But didn't happen on Sainz's car.
No, but so Leclerc, a bit in another interview, the remarks I've just talked about came in a press conference. He did also do an interview in which he talked about, he thought maybe it was all to do with tyres. The issue that Ferrari are having this year is it's hard for them to get the car in what they call the window, and Ollie are definitely going to get you to explain about that. But so it's either working or it's not, but getting it into the place where it is working, they can't consistently do that. And that's not just the car behaviour itself, but also the tyre behaviour, whether the tyre's at the right temperature or not. And he thinks he doesn't know, because obviously they have been through the data and they haven't got any answers for him, but he suspects that the root of the issue was something to do with that.
Yeah, just to pick up on your comment of the window that you hear many drivers mention. On some cars that window can be very large, and some cars that window can be very small, and that's just a way to describe the balance from front to rear. Some cars tend to have understeer, some cars tend to have oversteer, but the best cars have a solid combination of both. And
One of the things that I found interesting that George Russell actually said earlier on in the weekend, he was it's to do with, I don't want to get Ollie again your opinion on this. We're going to absolutely rinse you this weekend, by the way. Just FYI. The tyre blankets that are on the Formula 1 cars to keep the heat on them, they were initially in Formula 1 scheduled to be banned for 2024. The FIA have now said, okay, let's put a pin in that for the time being, but they can go back on that word within the next couple of months at the deadline, I think, sometime in the summer. In Formula E, which you most recently raced, there's no tyre warm-up blankets, are there?
No.
And so so you're fine, right? Or are there big issues in
this? Is the issue. You never see a fast Formula 1 car, with a lot of steering movement in the cockpit. As soon as you have any kind of oversteer movement in a Formula 1 car, which is extremely aerodynamic sensitive, the air moving over the car isn't working properly. You know what I mean? So as sometimes you see, a driver have a small oversteer moment in a high-speed corner, and then they completely lose the car, without warning, and it's very sudden. And that's just because of the steep loss of aerodynamic effect as soon as the car moves sideways. In Formula E and IndyCar, you very often see, drivers go through corners with a lot of counter steer, and they're really hustling the car around the track, but that's because they're not as aerodynamically sensitive. And so when you have this tire warming discussion and this Twitter war that I've seen recently, it becomes a safety concern for Formula One, because these cars aren't meant to be hustled around the track like that. And without tire warming going onto the track, it's very difficult and very unpredictable.
So one of the reason for the tyre warming ban is environmental. The Formula One and the FIA think that it's not right to fly. Oh, there's a nice shot of a groundhog. That'll get you excited, won't it,
well,
Harry? You've been talking about groundhogs all weekend, and there is one on the telly for you. Did you see one on your track walk yesterday?
Yeah,
or not?
Well, this is my first time in Canada, right? And so I dragged Ollie round for a track walk, and around about turn, where did we find one? About turn 4, I think, on the exit, or maybe it was turn 9. We had a little peek. But we're wondering how they get in, because there are certain gaps for the marshals to go through the walls, but they go underneath. I didn't realise.
They're burrowing.
They can burrow underneath. So that's how they get on.
They live in burrows, in fact.
Oh, Andrew Benson with the groundhog facts.
I've got lots of wildlife facts, mate. Anyway, back to tyre warming.
Back to tyre warming.
Well, it's kind of related, because it's all environmental, right? So they think that lugging these big, heavy tyre blankets around the world in aeroplanes, because freight costs money and weight of freight costs fuel, and then using the electricity to heat those tyre blankets up just to get the tyres hot for the drivers to go out. They think that's not a good thing holistically, and it's not a good thing for the image of the sport either. So they're trying to get rid of it. But the drivers are pushing back and saying, we think this is dangerous. We don't think the tyres are ready to be used without tyre warmers. And actually, they're making an interesting counterpoint to the environmental argument, which is that we're going to need to do more laps to heat up the tyres. So we're going to end up using more fuel and putting more carbon in the atmosphere that way than you're going to create by warming the tyres up in the first place. And by the way, if we're trying to go carbon neutral by 2030 as a sport, why can't one of the things we do be to use sustainable energy to heat our tyres? Why can't you make sure the electricity comes from hydroelectric or wind or tide or whatever? So there is a debate going on. There's an extra element to the debate as well, which is that one of the reasons that the Formula One bosses are pushing for no tyre warmers is because they hope it's a way of removing one of the inherent problems with the Pirelli tyres, which is this narrow working window that we were talking about. Quite often, like with Leclerc in Spain, if you can't get the tyre into the right temperature range, you're completely uncompetitive. And it's been a sort of ongoing thing with Pirellis for 12 years now, that the temperature window is too narrow. And some people that I know within, senior engineers within the sport, they say if you have a tyre that has to be heated up by the car on track, that kind of forces Pirelli to have a tyre that has a wider working window. So they don't always talk about these things, because people don't like to criticise Formula One suppliers, because obviously Pirelli are providing a lot of money to the sport as well. But you can see that it's a complicated issue.
Absolutely, I think that's clear. And it's not just limited to Formula 1. I believe the World Endurance Championship introduced that this year as well, and they've had a few scary moments with cars coming out of the pit lane in the sports car racing with tyres that are just woefully under pressure, particularly if the conditions are mixed, cold, raining, and spinning right off and having huge accidents. So that's something to bear in mind, and that's, I think, why, coming back to the original starter of this conversation, George Russell expressed his concerns about if that is reinstated by the FIA. Now, we are still under red flag conditions. That's why we're talking a lot about
Why
tyres.
is this taking so long?
I was going to say the same. This is ridiculous.
I've got the answer for you. Now, somebody actually messaged on hashtag BBCF1. Chris has said, is this the... Oh, no, it's not Chris. Somebody, Andrew, said, is this the longest F1 practice session red flag in history when there is no track debris to clear up? So basically, red flag came up. I don't know the answer to that question. red flag came out because of Pierre Gasly in the Alpine with drive shaft issues. He's been wheeled out through the barriers, but we've been under red flag ever since. And the reason is the CCTV around the track is down. There's a big communication system error at the moment. And the FIA and race control need the CCTV around the track for various safety precautions, and that is not working currently.
Well, do you know what's funny about that? And this may not be related, but I went to have a chat with someone at one of the teams earlier, and I couldn't get a coffee because they had no electricity. And I wonder whether it's the same thing.
Yeah, so earlier on, about maybe half an hour or so before we would get started the session, I believe there was a big outage. We had it in the commentary box. We had it down in the pit lane. Me and Ollie were walking down the pit lane, and we overheard some of the Red Bull engineers saying about trying to get their screens back up and running, saying, power's back on now. So clearly it's an issue that is affecting the paddock so far this weekend. And, we're nearly halfway through the session, and we've only had 12 drivers set 3 laps, and a couple have done out laps. So we've really not got any meaningful running whatsoever. And unfortunately for the fans that have really come out in their droves here already for a Friday practice session, sadly aren't getting any track running.
Well, it's good for Pierre Gasly, right? Because no one else is going on track.
Coming back to the mindset thing, Ollie, as well. I mean, now to mention, at least Pierre Gasly is kind of in the same boat as everybody else is now, but hopefully it won't be too long and we can get some track action in the next 34 minutes or so, which is what we have remaining of practice 1. But finding that rhythm, finding that flow. Some drivers, our rookie drivers, Logan Sargent, Oscar Piastri, Nick de Vries, have never raced around this track either, so they want to get as much running in as possible. We know track evolution is a massive thing, but despite that, the walls are close here. You need as much track time as possible. How does this affect the drivers' sort of mental capacity going into the weekend?
Sure, and that's where simulation becomes so important. I'm sure Logan has spent a lot of time on this track in the simulator, a track that he hasn't been to. I think he tweeted he's never been to Canada. So as an American, I find that hard to believe. So yeah.
And if people are wondering, by the way, why it matters that the CCTV isn't working, it's because, as well as the TV cameras, race control use CCTV cameras to cover the entirety of the track and work out what's going on. So it is very much a safety issue, because they can see things that might be dangerous for the drivers with the CCTV, which obviously they can't see with no CCTV. So that's the issue with the safety.
And many corners around this track are blind. They're just covered by the concrete barriers. So, without having the corner marshalling system up, and it becomes very dangerous in case a car at the other side of the corner was stopped and adjacent.
This actually happened a few races ago. I can't remember which one it was, but what it sort of reminds you of, I think, is how dependent Formula One has become on technology and the internet just for basic running. Because 30 years ago, they didn't use CCTV at Grand Prix. They didn't have driver light warning systems in the cockpits. They didn't have GPS. But Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna were perfectly capable of driving around a track for an hour and not crashing into other cars. And so was everybody else. But now it seems that that's not possible anymore.
No, well, we live in such the Formula One is all about pursuit of technology, pursuit of performance, pursuit of the best. And to be undone by CCTV cameras does kind of highlight stuff. The grandstands have already started with the Mexican waves. We've done a good bit of filler chat, but I think, Rosanna, it's your turn to do some filler.
Thanks very much, Harry. Yes, you were talking about that power outage before FP1, and I was just chatting to some of the people up and down the paddock, and they said, yeah, we lost power completely. Everybody did. And that's why there are generators all along the paddock. And I'm just standing next to the Logan Sargent generator, and to my left, Alex Albon's, and then an extra one as well. So Williams have got 3 out. And as I look further up the paddock, because I watch actually one of the Haas drivers, I think it's Kevin, walking towards the garage, more generators outside the Haas hospitality area as well. So they needed their generators, and those are the generators you'd see on the grid on a Sunday afternoon before the race. So they're still here, and I imagine they were brought out to be used, and then probably the teams, the mechanics, engineers had to get on with getting ready for the session. So they've just been left here. But I don't think, as Pierre Gasly walked past me back into the paddock, helmet on, looking like probably I would imagine, fairly frustrated inside that helmet.
Rosanna, I'd like to see a Logan Sargent generator.
Oh, you
do
do like the weirdest things.
Do they have a Fernando Alonso generator as well, or there's Hamilton one?
If it was small enough, I'd put it in my pocket and I'd bring it up to the commentary box for you. They're absolutely huge, though, these generators. They've got sort of different compartments within them, beautifully branded, as you would expect, and sparkling clean. I mean, cleaner than probably my kitchen worktop at home. As we know, the mechanics like to keep everything spotless. I am walking up towards Aston Martin because your wish is my command, obviously. I can't see any green generators, though, actually, so maybe they were all right. But yes, I'm walking past the AlphaTauri ones. As I said, the Haas ones are out. Oh no, I think I can see some Aston ones, but I can't see any branded ones. I'll have to keep hunting for you. There are some under some sort of black covers, and I think those might be the Aston ones, so I'm not sure which is Fernando's and which is Lance's. It would be wrong of me to take one and it to be ending up not being the one you want, Andrew.
This is top-tier generator chat, isn't it? Pick out your favourite one, Rosanna, and let us know. Feedback with that.
Oh, dear.
And Kaylee said on the hashtag BBCF1, so anyone having anything nice for dinner? I think we're having a team dinner tonight, aren't we? So we're all looking forward to that. Mexican, I think. So can't wait for that one. Andrew's in charge.
I couldn't get a place at any Mexican.
Oh no, what have we got?
I've gone Italian in the end.
Oh, Italian. Ollie's had about 3
but
pizzas in 2 days already.
I'm not complaining.
I knew you'd be happy with it.
Yeah. We've got to please ask you, because this first one. We'll make do. We just did have a little notice pop up on the screen graphics confirming the outage for the CCTV, and that the local organisers are working on it hard, but the session will not be restarted until it can be properly fixed due to safety reasons.
I saw earlier in our pictures that I think the marshals were trying to get Pierre's car back to pit lane, so maybe using this time to get that car back, and he might have a chance. This would be so lucky for him to maybe fix whatever issue he's got on to get back out there.
Yeah, as we were just seeing Charles Leclerc sitting patiently in his Ferrari with a Gilles Villeneuve tribute helmet, the red on the sides and the black through the middle, slightly edged out as well for Leclerc, who will be hoping that he can have a slightly better Grand Prix this weekend. But the fans are dancing in the grandstand, so they're still having a good time.
Well, they'll like Charles Leclerc's Gilles Villeneuve tribute helmet, won't they? And I tell you what, I do too. Sometimes I don't like it when drivers have like tribute helmets. It doesn't seem like that. Sometimes it doesn't feel like they're worthy of being compared to the driver they're doing the tribute to. You know, I won't name any names, but I've seen a few in my day. But I think for me, Charles Leclerc is a kind of modern-day Gilles Villeneuve, and not just because he drives for Ferrari, because he's attacking and he's on the limit all the time, and he's so straightforward and honest and open in the same way that Villeneuve was as a character. So he is a kind, it's fitting. And actually, if we look out of our window, can we see the Salut Gilles sign on the grid? I'm not sure we're in the right place.
We might be a bit further down the pit lane. We're near the Williams end. That's the Team Gantry sort of below the commentary box and slightly to the left. So we're right at the back end, but we're not too far away because the main straight isn't too long here. It's about 405 metres of the pit lane at least.
And if people don't know, Gilles Villeneuve was a hero in the 70s and early 80s. Is kind of why Canada fell in love with Formula One. He won the first race here in 1978 for Ferrari, the first of his 6 wins for Ferrari, and his sort of acrobatic, daring driving style made him, and also the fact that he was the best and fastest driver of his era, he made him a sort of global hero. And then he was killed in qualifying for the 1982 Belgian Grand Prix in what turned out to be a very dark year for Formula One. That was the first of many dark periods of episodes that year. But he has, as a result, he's become an absolute legend of Formula One history, and that's why it says Salut Gilles on the front of the grid.
I can imagine the emotion of winning your first race at your home Grand Prix, and that's certainly bringing out some motivation for a couple of these drivers. In this instance, Lance Stroll this weekend, this being his home race. As we see in our pictures, a lot of Lance Stroll merchandise in the crowd. So certainly some extra motivation for him this weekend.
The Alpine has been, I think that was in the back of the pit lane, wasn't it? On the back of the flatbed truck. So that's some positive news, at least, to come out for Alpine and Pierre Gasly. If we are able to get this session restarted again, there's about just over 25 minutes left. The Alpine currently being cinched up and off of the flatbed truck. So not necessarily saying that Alpine will suddenly see that car and be able to do a quick fix and it'll be out again, even if we only get 10 minutes of running. But it's slightly positive that they can get it back within the session time and not have it too dragged out. Of course, we're talking about Gilles Villeneuve, his son, Jacques Villeneuve, of course, the 1997 world champion for Williams. And I was doing a bit of research on Jacques Villeneuve on the way in, and I love how Wikipedia, the opening line, describes me. Normally, Oliver Askew is an American racing driver. Jacques Villeneuve is the 1997 Formula 1 world champion and amateur musician. He's released a couple of acoustic rock albums over the years, apparently, has old Jack. So good to see that. And, of course, the only Canadian F1 world champion. Could Lance Stroll possibly try and emulate that? The way it's going at the moment, he's being absolutely trounced by his teammate Fernando Alonso. But Aston Martin have brought upgrades, their first big upgrades of the year. And it's really, Andrew, isn't it, all to do with their side pods. It's quite a big overhaul for them.
Well, also the front of the floor, which is probably more important, actually. But the visible things, or the obviously visible things on the car that are new, I don't know how familiar the audience are with the shape of the Aston Martin side pods, but they've got what's called a water slide on the top of them. It's kind of like a channel down the sort of centre of the top of the side pods, which carries air down to the back of the car. The idea being to feed it nice and smoothly and as fast as possible to the top of the diffuser and the rear beam wing there. They've made that channel longer and steeper with the aim of getting more air mass down it, and they've also made the undercut in the side pods much larger. So it looks, on the face of it, quite a significant upgrade, and Fernando Alonso was quite relatively positive about it yesterday for someone who tends to play these things down. So once they do get going on the track, it's going to be interesting to see whether that upgrade has moved Aston Martin forward, especially because they had a difficult weekend in Spain last time out. But I think that people think this is going to be a good track for them anyway, so it could be a good weekend for that team.
Could well be. Well, it hasn't been a brilliant start to the weekend for Alpine, particularly on the Pierre Gasly side of the garage. Rosanna, what news can you bring us?
Well, moments ago I saw Pierre Gasly walking through the paddock, still with his helmet on, with a bit of a strut, it has to be said, which I sort of interpreted to sort of mean frustration. And then I went back into the pit lane and I've just seen his car, the Alpine car, being wheeled along by the mechanics. It was brought into the pit lane on the low loader. That then went ahead of the car and the mechanics were running alongside it. And I noted a little bit of the Floviz paint on the front right tyre. So Alpine were obviously wanting to gather data from this session. But the best thing is, for them, everybody else has wanted to do the same, and they've all had the same limited running, not just Pierre with this problem on the Alpine.
Exactly right, isn't that, Rosanna? And we can do a bit of wildlife watch as well. The groundhogs are back out in force. Andrew?
I've got an update from the FIA on the CCTV drama. It says the delay will be longer as the CCTV is not synced correctly, and until it's been fixed, we can't run on track. The system is a local installation, and it's not our fault. And they're continuing to work to resolve the problem. The clock will continue to run down on FP1, and the session will not be extended, as there must be 2.5 hours between P1 and P2. We're looking at options to extend P2.
Okay.
So we're not going to make our table at this rate, are we?
Yeah, well, you booked late as well, didn't you? And we've got to get out of the car park. We're parked, actually, by Daniel Ricciardo. They sent us all the way down the side of it's where they did the canoeing, I think.
Don't make it sound so glamorous.
It's really not. I'm on a
You make me walk the track yesterday, and now we're parked 1,000 meters down the road. Longer.
Tell them about the bank that you're parked on as well. Yeah, people won't know about the parking system at the Circuit du Mont.
Neither did I until I turned up here, and for some reason you have made me the lead driver for the car hire. And you trundle down basically the side of the Olympic basin, really, isn't it, where they did the 1976 Summer Olympics, where they did all the rowing and the canoeing. And there's a small road that runs parallel alongside it, and then it's a grassy bank, quite steep, but doable. But then around the 1250 mark on the river, the incline suddenly gets very, very steep indeed. And that is where we have been forced apart. Luckily, we've got a bit of a 4x4, but it is quite a walk from the bridge that you've got to enter into the paddock. And even Charles Leclerc's Ferrari couldn't manage it either. He had to get out of the car and somebody else had to drive his car all the way down. But we were today in good company because I dropped Andrew and producer Paddy off at the front gate because they couldn't be asked to walk.
Careful.
Ollie did a great job and came with me, and we were parked just
nice
in front of Daniel Ricciardo. So clearly we're in good company down there.
He's really mixing with the plebs,
That's
isn't
what
he?
happens when you're a reserve.
Ricciardo. But I mean, look, in all seriousness, of course, no one really cares about your travails as a radio commentator, Harry. You know, first world problems and all that, and the audience would kill to be in your position. But it is actually a relatively significant issue because Formula One a bit frustrated with the Canadian organisers and their refusal, as they see it, to upgrade some of the facilities around this track. I had personal experience of this yesterday where I didn't get one of your car park passes and I was in a separate car park quite a long way away from the main bit of the circuit, so I had a bit of a sense of humour failure about that yesterday morning. But that's why you're the main driver, Harry, now.
Yeah.
So I think Formula One want Montreal to upgrade the circuit, but Montreal aren't that keen to do the upgrade. And when you look around, there are certain things about the facilities that honestly they haven't improved for like 30 odd years. I've been coming here since 1996 on and off, and one of the approach roads that all the team bosses and drivers have to take to get to the uphill car park that we're talking about is an unmetalled road alongside a shipping lane. And I don't know about you, Harry, but I've often been a bit anxious about driving off the edge of that road into the shipping lane a few times. The traffic's a bit rubbish, and all these sorts of things. They're the sorts of things that, in the end, if race circuits aren't careful, they end up losing their place on the calendar because of. So Spa, for example, in Belgium, is a similar situation. There's all sorts of issues with the facilities there, and they're in quite a precarious position at the moment. It looks like, it was at one point this year, looked like it might be the last Spa, or at least the last year of Spa as a regular feature on the calendar, which some people will think is sacrilege because it is one of the iconic circuits, and quite rightly so. But Formula One basically said you need to upgrade your facilities, and if you don't, you're going to get dropped off the calendar. It looks like they're going to be all right for next year now because South Africa, I hear, isn't going to happen now, so there is still a space for Spa, but circuits have to take this issue seriously, even if they don't want to.
Well, people obviously didn't care about my drive-in, but actually someone on the hashtag BBCF1 are asking, did Benson drive in today? Because on the checkered flag, he had struggled with parking yesterday. So you can listen back to the full travails of our parking on the Checkered Flag podcast preview show. In between sessions, unfortunately, we have got still no running red flag due to CCTV being down at the track, and the locals working hard to try and get it back up and running. Let's head down to Rosanna.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, down in the paddock, which, just following on from Andrew's discussions about the sort of standard of the circuit Gilles Villeneuve, there was a sort of uplift in the facilities in 2019, but I think Andrew's right, certain parts haven't really kept up, and the man running the show here at the circuit is François Dumontier, but the circuit's actually owned by the city, and so I think that is what makes it harder to upgrade the circuit and to upgrade the facilities. And they've sort of said, look, it's a 5-year plan to enhance the fan experience, but you know, a contract is a contract, but sometimes contract schmontract. We're meant to be racing here till 2031. It was originally 2029, but then with the 2 COVID years, it was extended by 2 years. That's a long time to be coming here, but as we know, this sport moves fast, and if you can't keep up, you may well lose your slot. So that 5-year plan might need to be sort of squeezed up into months rather than years, perhaps, so that we don't have more little slip-ups like this. But we've had problems like this. You mentioned it earlier this season, Andrew. We also had it, I remember, in Imola when the team radios were down. And so, as we were saying earlier on, so much rests on communication and technology now that we all get a little bit stranded, don't we? If one little piece in the puzzle goes awry.
Yeah, and thanks for reminding me about where the last issue that stopped the practice session was, Rosanna. I had forgotten that it was the Imola team radio issue that I was thinking about. My aging brain had not remembered exactly what the detail was. But if people think this is all a bit, F1 being a bit spoilt and so on, well, maybe it is in some ways. And everybody loves coming to Montreal. It's one of their favourite venues for, I think, nearly everyone in the paddock. It's a great track. There's a great atmosphere here. Pierre Gasly's back in his car in the garage, so if the session restarts, he will be able to get out again. But I know for a fact that yesterday Stefano Domenicali, the chairman of Formula One, was caught up in some of these logistical issues. It took him a long time to get to the track, and he definitely had a sense of humour failure, which I think was bigger than mine, because I know that he had a meeting with one of the circuit bosses here in which he made his views on the matter quite clear.
Well, the other thing as well is the Canadian Grand Prix is a massively popular venue, as you say. I think last year there was over nearly 340,000 fans turned out over the 3 days, which is huge for a Formula One venue. Surely we've had pretty much no running with 15 minutes left of practice one, with not a lot of ideas as to whether FP2 will take place, when it will take place, how long it will be. That's a day ticket kind of out the window, right? So surely fans would be asking, I think quite rightly, well, I would like a little bit of a refund here, or what can you offer me? Is that not something Formula One has to consider now with the fans paying good money to be here?
Well, that would be, Formula One would say that's the circuit's responsibility, as it was, for example, in Spa when it rained and there was no race, or they drove around for 2 laps behind the safety car and then declared it a race. And in this case, it does seem as if it is actually the circuit's fault. It wasn't Spa's fault that it rained, although the fact that Spa is where Spa is, you get a lot of rain. But in this case, this is, it seems, if we believe the FIA anyway, and why wouldn't we, that this is a circuit installation technology fault. So I don't know what the fans are going to do, but I would be annoyed if I was in the grandstand having paid however many Canadian dollars it is for a ticket.
Which I think is fair enough. Just to give you an update, 5 minutes ago, the FIA said the delay will be longer as the CCTV is not synced correctly, and until the issue is being fixed, we cannot run on track. The clock will continue to run down. But they said at the time they are looking at options to extend FP2, and I'm now being told in my ear that they are seriously looking at those options now. FP2 most likely will be extended if we get absolutely nothing left in these 13 and 39 minutes that remain of free practice 2, Ollie.
Yeah, to switch the subject a bit, we just saw a picture of the Williams cockpit, and I've always wondered, maybe you have an answer to this, why doesn't that steering wheel have a dash on it?
Classic.
Okay, I believe the answer is weight. It sounds ridiculous, but
it makes sense.
Yeah, so the fancy steering wheels that you see on the in-car cameras with the screens on the steering wheel, I think the number, if I'm right, it's like 100 grams or something. They weigh more than the Williams setup with the screen on the monocoque and the steering wheel in front of it. But having said that, you would think, wouldn't you, that if all the other 9 teams can manage and that they see an advantage in having that steering wheel, Williams might have made the same decision. And maybe now James Vowles is the team principal there. It's very much not the top of his priority list. Obviously, there's a lot of other problems at Williams. But maybe he'll make things change on that front.
That's been a staple of that car for so many years now, and I've always wondered.
It's nearly 10 years, actually, isn't it? I think back to 2014, was it when they introduced those steering wheels?
I can imagine that with less weight on the wheel, it also changes the kickback of the wheel. So maybe that has...
I'll take your word for that, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it makes... I should be designing it, I don't know.
That's what we'd like to see. Rosanna, what are you making of steering wheel at the Williams?
Well, it's more the Williams problem, and Andrew mentioned James Vowles there, the new team principal, who of course has shifted across from the Mercedes outfit as their chief strategist. But I was interested to hear what he was saying about what's lacking at Williams, and saying some of the kit, some of the technical things that they can work with at the factory are so out of date, almost 30 years or so, and that's kind of to be expected, isn't it? Because they haven't really had any investment until Doralton arrived a couple of years ago. So I imagine, as you say, the steering wheel is on the list of things to change, but I reckon there are are quite a few other things that they need to be doing first and foremost. But it's interesting, isn't it? You go to a new team, and I think Valtteri Bottas the same with Alfa Romeo, having come from Mercedes, probably goes in and thinks, gosh, we had it a bit better where I was before. What can we change first? You have to sort of write down your list of requirements and then prioritise them. So interesting, isn't it? Switching between teams and wondering what could be done better and what they did differently or better at the last place.
And Rosanna, we've just had some news in from the stewards about P2. As Harry was saying, it is going to be extended. It's official now from the FIA. It'll be extended by 30 minutes, and it's going to start at 16:30 local time. So that's 9:30 in the UK.
Yeah, and that's half an hour, as you rightly say, before it was originally supposed to start, which would be at 5 o'clock local time here in Canada. So that's good news. We will get some more running, hopefully, but if they can fix it in that gap. The clock still continues to count down here for free practice 1, but it sounds like we're not really going to get any kind of action unless there's a massive turnaround in the next 10.5 minutes.
We're really earning our money here.
Welcome to commentary, Oliver Askew, in Formula 1 at least. I know you're very used to it in Formula E, but I think you asked me, I think you slightly forgot that this was an hour-long session, didn't you? So an hour-long of a red flag. How was that?
No, it's gone by quick.
Well, we've
I'm
still
in
got
good
time
company.
to go.
Just you wait till we get on to cheese.
Well, what's that about?
Well, that was that. Well, I feel like our cheese is the driving parking situation chat, really. So that's where we've gone with that. Red flag filler talk, essentially, Ollie. We haven't even spoken about you buying me breakfast this morning yet.
I don't want to talk about it.
No, we'll leave that for FP2. It's now half an hour longer, so we've got to talk about it. But it was a lovely breakfast, I must say. On Williams, and James Vowles obviously saying some of their base 20 years out of date, and confirmation from race control there that the session will not be resumed. So they have called quits on that session. So that is it for free practice 1, essentially then. So we'll wait and see how the rest of it pans out. But Lewis Hamilton out of the car, overalls off, and debriefing with that little running he had with the team principal Toto Wolff. Perhaps we'll save the Williams chat for later on. Valtteri Bottas then will technically be the fastest lap time, a 1:18.7 in front of Stroll, Alonso, Perez, Verstappen, the top 5.
He's got a special helmet on the weekend. Valtteri Bottas. A little tribute to Canada with what is it?
Say that again.
What?
I haven't turned my microphone on there. He's got a kind of Canadian mountain forest scene going on with some beavers.
With some beavers.
Very cool.
Lovely.
He's a lumberjack on it, chopping some wood.
Yeah.
On the helmet, there's a picture, a sort of cartoon image of himself.
And his girlfriend designed it.
Yeah, she's really
An
good
artist.
actually at these.
Yeah.
She's just
It's not the first time.
No, they're all really cool, I think.
It's one of a couple of nice designs that we've had here. Miami, nearly every driver had a special helmet design. Just a couple here though in Canada. We're going to keep broadcasting until from another 9 minutes or so, so you get the full red flag filler chat. But actually, I want to then mention this James Vowles comment, because he was talking about young drivers, Ollie, and having academies. And his previous role at Mercedes was very much heading up their junior team and signing up the likes of George Russell and even younger, having to go through to karting nearly. And just before he left, one of his last big signings was a driver called Kimi Antonelli, who is hailed as the next best thing, currently coming up through the ranks through Formula 4 and Formula Regional before you then get up to Formula 3, and then you're on the road to Formula 1. But he's saying actually, because there are actually quite a lot of driver academies out there up and down the grid, we're getting to a point where there's going to be a bit of a void, and they're going to have to go all the way further down to sort of grassroots karting. I don't know what you make of that, and just the driver academy situation at the moment in terms of a driver's young career.
Yeah, I look back on Lewis Hamilton's career being signed very early by McLaren, and the earlier these teams are able to spot talent, the better chance that they'll have of finding, the next Max Verstappen and so on. So it's extremely important. And I read a recent article of Toto Wolff regretting not signing Max Verstappen, and you can see the effect of that.
Absolutely. Well, James Vowles saying quite a lot in the build-up, the team principal of the Williams team. And actually, we've had an email come in, f1@bbc.co.uk, from Sam saying, has the Williams car had any upgrades? I saw a headline about something coming in Canada. We can tell you they do have upgrades, but they are only running them on Alex Albon's car. Nothing to report back from this free practice 1 session because we haven't really had any running for it. But hopefully they'll get some more free practice 2 running with those upgrades on Alex Albon's Williams car. But he also asked a question to you, Ollie.
Oh boy.
I know, get ready for this. I know Oliver raced in Belle Isle. Which does he think is the better island-based track?
We had this chat the other day.
That's a great question.
Yeah. No, it's a little funny to have 2 North American street circuits on an island like this next to such a big city.
So Belle Isle is on the IndyCar calendar,
yes,
isn't it?
yeah. So it's Detroit to put into more detail. So Belle Isle is an island off of the city of Detroit, which is where they used to hold the Detroit Grand Prix. Now it's moved to downtown Detroit, just a couple miles away. But what was the question? Which do I prefer?
So which do you think is the better island-based track?
Okay.
That's from Sam.
Oh, I mean, I'm a little IndyCar biased.
Well, yeah, probably. Well, you walked the track. We did say yesterday on our track walk that this Canadian track is so much smoother, right, than any kind of IndyCar street road course you'd get.
For sure. Yeah, certainly the Detroit track has more character. To drive, I would imagine it's more difficult. It's very physical. I remember driving that track, and obviously the IndyCar doesn't have power steering, but there's a corner. I can't remember the corner number, but it's the double left towards the end of the track, starting sector 3, I believe. And I was trying to turn as hard as I could, and I literally had to slow down because I wasn't going to make the radius of the corner, because that's how heavy the steering was in that particular part of the track. Very high grip. Maybe I just didn't work out hard enough.
Well, maybe you didn't. Maybe you didn't. We've got a gym in our hotel, in inverted commas, accommodation. Have you used it yet?
Maybe.
No. Did you actually? No. You were threatening this morning.
Oh, we had pancakes this morning.
We did, but it was quite early. I thought we had time in between pancakes and leaving.
They don't digest that quick.
Okay, fine. All right. And that was your second breakfast as well, after the breakfast tacos that you enjoyed. Well, thank you, Sam, for sending in that question. If you are happening to tune in for the end of free practice 1, well, the good news is you didn't really miss anything, because there was very, very, very little track action. The Pierre Gasly Alpine car stopped early with drive shaft issues, I should say, and that caused a red flag. But then the red flag was lengthened by pretty much the entirety of the session, because the CCTV footage has gone down around the track, and due to safety concerns and issues, the session cannot be restarted until that has been sorted out, and it has not been sorted out. So the caveat is that free practice 2 will be extended by 30 minutes and will get going at 4:30 local time. So that's half an hour earlier. So the good news is that we'll still all be able to make our dinner reservations this evening, and hopefully we'll get a little bit more track action later on this afternoon, Rosanna.
We certainly will. Yes, you haven't missed too much of FP1, but we will be treated to a little bit more extra track action later on. We'll be live at 4:25. That's 9:25 in the UK, and we'll be on BBC Sports 5 Sports Extra and BBC Sport website as well. So you can join us then for more live commentary of all that's to come here in Montreal ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix.